Okay, so I'm going to tell you a quick story. A couple of years ago, I was doing some leadership training with a client of mine here in Edmonton, and one of the managers said, you know, when we were talking about the performance review system, he said, you know, I got to tell you, we went online a couple years ago. It had been a paper form before, and people filled it out manually. And one of my direct reports, who was a supervisor, had changed the date from last year to this year and resubmitted the exact same form. And I said, why do you think that is? And it's because they did not value, the employees and even the managers and supervisors did not value the system that they had because it wasn't meeting their objectives. So that's why we're here today, is for you to take a look at what is it that allows you to integrate your performance management system so that it actually meets your strategic objectives. My name is Juliana, and I live here in Edmonton. I run a human resources consulting company called Juna. We've been working together for the last 11 years, but for the last 20 years, I've specialized in learning and development, working with leaders at all levels. The smallest organization that we work with is under 10 people. The largest is over 100,000. We work with clients in Canada, the US, as well as in Europe. So it's my great pleasure to spend the next 75 minutes with you looking at your performance management system. And all I ask is that as questions come up, because this is basically 3 hours worth of content boiled down into 1 hour. I'm going to give you as much as I can in a short period of time. You should all have some PowerPoint slides in front of you that allows you to take notes. Take notes, and if you have some questions, save them to the end because we have a Q&A section. Sound good? Okay, here we go. So, by the end of the next 75 minutes, here's what we're going to cover, so you'll be able to understand this and more. What is performance management? How do I make it an integrated system? We're going to look at the managers and the employee's role in performance management. We'll talk about what you do before, during, and after the review process. I'm also going to pepper in here some best practices as well as some trends and current issues. I just spoke to a bunch of HR folks for 3 hours on this very topic in the financial sector and looked at the history and the trends. And so we'll also talk about some technological advances and how technology is changing performance management. And then we're going to finish off with progressive discipline. How many of you have done what I've done, which is I say, oh, we're putting the guy in a performance track, which is basically saying we're going to write up a PIP, a performance improvement plan, or put him into progressive discipline. So what I want you to walk away from is understanding that performance management, when it's integrated, is actually a proactive approach to getting good results through people in your organization. Progressive discipline is the reactive things that we have to do when performance is not meeting standards. So you're going to see the heavy emphasis on proactive versus reactive. Sound good? Okay, hold on to your seats. We're going to get rocking. You need to get to know your neighbors. Because we have over 50 people registered, I'm not going to have you do a quick round of introductions because that'll take up the whole hour. But if you can get to know your neighbors at your table teams, here's what I'd like you to do if you haven't already done it. Who are you? Oh, where do you work? What's your role there? And choose one word, share it with your table group, to describe your current performance management system. Yes, you can do 2 words maximum, but basically use some descriptive words to describe your current system. Ready, set, go. Get to know your neighbors. Okay, it got kind of quiet, so that tells me that you're almost there. Am I right? Everyone knows everyone now in your neighborhood? Because you're going to be working through a case study together, so it's nice to know who you're going to be discussing this with. All right. Thank you, everyone, for getting warmed up. All right, so I'm a Dilbert fan, and this captures it quite well. Dilbert's manager comes up and says, from now on, I'll be managing by exception. If I don't talk to you for months, assume you're doing a good job. Or that your project isn't important, or that I don't remember your name. Now you probably know this, that a good ratio for supervisor to employees is single digits. So when you get to 10 or more direct reports, it becomes really, really hard structurally, right? I had one manager years ago in the telecom and had 47 direct reports, no team leads. How the heck is he going to manage that many people and do an effective job at giving feedback? So let's take a look at what makes a good system solid, there are 3 things, and you know this too. The first thing is we look traditionally at the annual review, right? That red box down in the bottom left-hand corner. And I'm going to talk about some trends around that. But at the annual review, traditionally, we looked in the rear view mirror and we did report cards on our employees, right? And then we got progressive and we said, okay, well, for it to actually be a system, and an integrated system, we not only look at the past to inform the current state and the future state, but let's set some goals, right? So we're going to put together a plan, a developmental plan. Great. Well, that's only good if your frontline supervisors and managers are coaching in a targeted way to help employees achieve those plans. So when we do that, then as you know, there's no surprises when we come to do our review. Now, how many of you, quick show of hands, currently your system has an annual review? Boom. Oh, lots of you, fabulous. How many of you do biannual? So every 6 months, your managers or supervisors are touching base. Anybody doing quarterly? Okay, how about monthlies? Anybody move to monthly? Oh, très bien. Yes, okay, great. There's no right or wrong, but there are some best practices, and we're going to talk about those. So this is the model that we're going to use, and we're going to start with the review system. Bum, bum, bum. How many of your employees, or maybe you've worked at other places and you felt like, oh my gosh, I'm dreading it. So at your table groups, because you got to know your neighbors a little bit, discuss what your current review process is like. Is it like this? Do your employees dread it? Or do they look forward to it? Because Barb and I have worked with lots of different clients over the last 5 years together, and we only have one client. It's a national client, and they wanted us to come in to their 40th anniversary. They took us to Banff, and we did this retreat thing with them, et cetera, and we were looking at their policy, like we were rolling out new policies and their handbook. And they said, could you also do some training on performance management? And so when we looked at it, all their managers and site supervisors and all the employees were actually pretty happy with their current system. And we said, well, why are we training them? Nothing's like, what are we trying to fix? So that's the only client that we've ever had that actually thought that they had a decent system. Because there's no such thing as a perfect performance management system. Set the expectation that what makes somebody happy is going to make others unhappy. The question is, are you doing some good things that are helping achieve results? So around the table, talk about your current review system. What do you like about it? What don't you like? You have 2 minutes. Ready, set, go. All right, that's time. That's time. Sorry to cut off good discussion. No, we got to keep things going. All right. Quick question. Do any of you have a system that you think is working rather well? It's not perfect, but it's working. It's okay to be proud of it. You are the anomaly. Would your employees, is it the employees don't appreciate your system, or is it the managers, or is it both? Both. I remember watching a colleague of mine. She's a good friend, and she's been an HR manager at the same company for many, many years, and it's the only HR job she's ever had. So no real mentor outside of this role. And I did some training with her managers around how to, do some HR stuff, right? Because they're across the country. And she was trying to roll out a new form, and it was a big form. And I could hear the eyes rolling in the room, right? Her managers were going, oh my gosh, because the form was about HR, the form wasn't about the managers. And she was trying to decentralize some of these conversations. And so oftentimes, if you're doing HR off the side of your desk, or if you're a dedicated HR person, is your system user-friendly? Because if you're Air Canada, when you need to be WestJet, that's going internet, that's going public. But truly, if you're customer service oriented, your system will be adopted easier than if you're not customer service oriented. So that's one way to get your system integrated, is make it easy, make it accessible. All right. On your tables, we're going to dive into a case study, because case studies are the best way to learn. At the front of your tables, you should see a 2-pager, your PMS audit. PMS, which means Performance Management System, although sometimes it's a double entendre. Okay. So here's the scenario. I'm going to read it out, and then you're going to have 15 minutes to discuss this at your table groups. Pick a spokesperson to report back the pros and cons of this system and 1 or 2 recommendations that you have around changing this system. Here's the scenario. You are the HR manager at an Alberta-based land development company. The company has been around for 20 years. Its workforce is non-unionized and has approximately 80 employees with offices in both Edmonton and Calgary. The head office is here in Edmonton. You just started at this organization 3 months ago, and in your first 90 days, you completed an audit of the current HR programs to do a current state analysis of the HR functions. What you've learned about the current performance management system during your assessment is the following. Your observations are the annual reviews are supposed to be done every year in the month of January, quiet time for the business. There are 6 managers, 4 in Edmonton and 2 in Calgary, who are responsible for completing the annual reviews of their direct reports. So you look at the math there. You've got 6 managers, 80 people. The same form is used for the corporate staff or office employees and the field employees, so the site folks. Both the employee and the manager are to complete this form in advance before meeting, and then they are supposed to discuss their respective ratings at a 1-hour-long meeting, so self-evaluation versus manager evaluation. So in other words, I assess myself on a rating scale, and then you assess me on a rating scale. Then we come together, we have a cup of coffee, and we negotiate and discuss. The personnel files have copies of each year's evaluations, and it appears that the managers have completed them for the past 5 years, and employees have signed off without exceptions. Some evaluations have notes from the manager about substandard performance, which is written in what you would describe as a harsh tone, and there is no reference to previous discussions about the behavioral issues or notes in the personnel files. Next page. This is a paper form system. The performance appraisal document is 6 pages long. 3 pages of the form evaluates whether the employees carry out his or her duties as per the job description based on technical competencies. There are no behavioral competencies listed. Then 1 page assesses whether he or she met the goals that were set from last year. Personal goals were to align with the organizational objectives as well as any team-specific objectives. Then the next page is used for goal setting for the upcoming year, and the final page is for sign-off, both you and the manager, and dating and all that, to make it an official document that goes in the personnel file. Here is the rating scale. It's 5 points. 1 is poor performance, 2 needs improvement, 3 is satisfactory, 4 exceeds expectations, and 5 walks on water. Oh, we have a client, like this is made up out of our client base, and it's a mix of many clients. No definitions or examples are provided to delineate between these 5 ratings, however. Raises are given to employees based on their overall score. So in other words, 4s and 5s get raises. If you get a 3, so you're satisfactory, but you don't get more than satisfactory, you keep your job and you keep the same pay. Do you all know what calibration is? Because there's no calibration system used, although it is widely known that the sales and marketing manager is a lenient rater and always gives his employees increases. Who knows what calibration is? Just a quick show of hands. You've heard of calibration? Okay, yeah. A lot of people, if you've never worked in an organization where they did calibration, here's what it is. You know, we've got 4 managers in Edmonton and 2 in Calgary. We've got 6 managers. So all the managers meet with their employees, and they give the ratings, and then they come back, and all the managers sit in a boardroom, and they lay out how they've rated all of their people, and then they negotiate amongst themselves at this level. They either rank up or rank down what they discussed with their employees. Why would they do this? To create consistency across the leadership team or management team, and also sometimes for budgetary reasons. We only have this pot of money to do pay increases across the organization, So we now have to negotiate, and we often will bell curve. So that's what calibration is that the managers come together and look at who's lenient, who's too strict, you know, the rater errors, right? And so on. So that's your scenario. What questions do you have before you dive in? No. Okay, you have about 15 minutes to discuss pros and cons, make a recommendation or two that you have for this organization, and choose a spokesperson who is willing to speak up and speak loudly back to the large group if I happen to select you. Ready, set, go. Okay, so we could probably pick this apart for another 15 minutes, hey? Yeah. There are a lot of cons to this scenario, but there are some pros. So have you all got a spokesperson at your table? All right. Chris is gonna run around with the mic so that when you share the pros and the cons, it gets captured on the video. Do you want me to repeat as well, or maybe, yeah, okay, good. All right, so can I get a volunteer, put your hand up please, to give us one positive thing that's going on for this performance review system. Okay, right up here, oh, over here, yeah, first one. Okay, speak loud.
It looks like they're actually doing them.
Yeah, woo-hoo. Check. Yeah, you're right. It looks like they're actually doing them. They're getting done. You know, it's supposed to be done in January. We might have to herd some cats, but they are getting done. Yeah, okay, good. Another one. Oh, that they're getting done? Okay, another one?
Oh. Sorry, that there is an opportunity for the employee to do self-evaluation as well as have the manager do evaluation.
Did you all hear that? The employee has an opportunity to self-reflect and self-evaluate. Okay, good. Another one. Yeah.
The supervisor or manager is actually mentioning issues, maybe in a harsh tone, but actually saying when there's an issue.
Yeah, I heard that at another table, that real issues are being acknowledged and recognized, maybe not in a respectful way or in an appropriate way, but they are holding people accountable. Okay, so you're really stretching, you're looking for some good stuff. One more positive thing. Okay.
Like overall, their system seems to be very consistent. I don't know about the quality of it, but it's consistent.
Consistency, yeah, okay, fabulous. There's something else in here, maybe you already picked up on it, you're just too shy to speak out, but the goals are aligned with team and organizational. It's not just individual goals. If you want to have an integrated system, if you only incent people to do their own work, you can sometimes, the unintended natural consequence is that you de-incentivize, if that's a word, I don't know, but you disincent teamwork or connection to organizational goals. So then you get a lot of superstars that are not team players. So they actually are trying to connect it to things that are outside of the individual. Did anybody pick up on that? Yeah, that's key for an integrated process, is that goal setting is not just for individuals. Beautiful. All right, let's pick it apart. What were some challenges that you found with it, and what's one recommendation that you would make? Bring it on. Okay. Thank you.
We felt that a January appraisal date probably wasn't realistic. Maybe you start in November and 2 months in, you shouldn't have a formal appraisal. And in addition to that, perhaps you should have informal performance management throughout the year. Bingo. So that yearly appraisal isn't a surprise and maybe doesn't have those harsh tones. Because it says here that there was no reference to previous discussions about behavioral issues. And then the other con we had was that there's no definitions for the rating system, and the appraisal is not linked to a job description or it's not specific to a job role, whereas if I'm an admin assistant, I probably don't have the same competencies and technical requirements as my manager. Right. So just a little bit more simplicity there.
Yeah, fabulous. There were 2 or 3, real opportunities. No, but like there's a lot of work that needs to be done with this system because this is pretty archaic, right? There's some good stuff to it, but that rating system, that's a biggie. If you don't have really good examples and really specific delineated, here's what walks on water is versus exceeds expectation versus satisfactory, and you're tying it to pay, oh, you've got a classic demotivating system because it looks arbitrary. And my manager likes me or doesn't like me. Okay, bring it on. Give me another one, please. Another con and your recommendations. At the back table first.
It's to do with the behavioral competencies not being listed because your behavioral competencies really indicate the culture of the organization rather than the technical. Anyone can just check a box on technical, but if you don't, it's how the people interact with each other, which is really key to the success of an organization. So you have to have that. I think is much highly rated than the technical in some senses.
I'm glad that you said that. One of my favorite clients years ago, their CEO, said that they had noticed that their system was always focused on the what. Are we achieving the what, the results? But not the how we got there. And what was happening is you get these superstars who are achieving results but bullying everybody. And so he actually would get up in front of the organization, and it was a pretty like mid-sized to large organization. He said, from now on, it's no longer acceptable to just get the results if you leave a quote-unquote wake of dead bodies behind you. Those were his exact words. And the reason being is that we have core values, we have corporate values, and if you're not demonstrating those as you're getting the results, then it's not balanced. So I'm glad that you picked that one up. It's really key. Right on. Another one? Oh, okay, and then you next, yeah.
And that's becoming more pertinent because as technical competencies can be taken over by IT, then it becomes more about the behavioral competencies. But one of the things that we talked about but didn't, was the idea of a calibration system post-evaluation and feeling that that in some ways can de-incentivize.
It does.
And so that if calibration needed to happen, that once the rubric was developed for the rating system, that's where the calibration needed to happen.
Yeah, exactly. So if you look at the sales and marketing manager who just rates all of his team members 4s and 5s so he can give them incentives, well, you get silos in an organization, and there's inequity. And the system can lose its value. And so in that situation, you have to look at the rest of the other 5 managers and say, hey, so do I just, as the leader of that sales and marketing manager, do I need to go have a conversation and do some coaching and training around how to evaluate my employees, or do I need to do a systemic change? Yeah, good point, because calibration can be really powerful if it's done well, but I've seen it have the exact opposite effect in an organization and take a really cool system and degrade it. Yeah, fabulous.
There's also, out of the 6 pages, I think 4 of them were looking at whether, like, the past rather than
Bingo.
looking at setting future goals and development goals for the future, whereas it kind of should be the other way around.
Yeah. And 6 pages, like, shoot me now, sorry. Like, paperwork, especially for the guys in the field. Guys and gals in the field. Did anybody pick up on the field and office are getting evaluated the same way? Now, that could be a pro and a con, because you've got the consistency factor, but nothing around the behavioral, around the core values and things like that. It's all around technical competency. There's a gap there. Okay, one more con, yeah.
We just identified that they are both filling out the form in advance, but then coming together and discussing it on the spot. And there could be an opportunity there for the employee or both the employee and the manager to submit those in advance so that the manager can plan out a more targeted conversation based on what they know the employee is going to say.
Yeah, Yeah, we're going to talk about that in a little bit more detail. I'm glad you picked it up. Is there anything else that you feel really passionate about in this case study that needs to change? Okay, one more?
Just collaborative goal setting
Collaborative goal setting. Between whom?
between the manager and the employee.
Beautiful. Yeah. Now, I don't know if you've ever had this where somebody's told you what your goals are. How committed are you to those goals? and that's the key. So one of the themes I hope you take away from this session is the importance of you training your managers and ideally also your employees around their roles and responsibilities in this whole system. Without that training, they're just doing what their role models have shown them how to do, which may or may not be a good system. Yeah, which is an investment of time and energy. If you don't have that kind of time and energy, you're better off, okay, this is really blunt, but if you have such a broken system, you're better off scrapping it and not doing it than spending the resources working a broken machine, right? So either fix it or take a step back. I have one client that's global that said, you know, we need to take a step back because our system's not working for us. And so instead of just pushing something through, we're going to do a focus group, or like a series of focus groups with our different sites throughout, you know, the world, and figure out whether we need to tailor it for different countries, probably, as well as what stays the same. So they're taking a good couple of years to figure out how to build a new system. And then they're just putting it on hiatus while they, you know, organize that. And that's probably smart, because then they've got those resources utilized to do it right. Otherwise, these systems can actually work against productivity. Okay, so thank you for playing with the case study. Now, the subsequent slides talk about a lot of these issues. The first one being the annual review is almost dead. Here's why. Is that, look at the average tenure for Gen Y, millennials, is 2 years. If you get 5 years, because we have labor mobility. My dad worked as a chemistry professor at the university for 36 years. That's really rare now. So you want to have more frequent touch points. The US Department of Labor said that Gen Y, or millennials, by the time that they're 38 years old, will have had, on average, 14 jobs. Right? So if that's the case, then you need to have more frequent touch points. And annually is probably not going to cut it. Plus, you know, don't tell me what I did 9 months ago. I don't remember what I did 9 months ago. Yeah. So that's why I was asking about quarterly versus monthly, because we moved to best practices of quarterly, but even quarterly, if they're not, like, it doesn't have to be super formal and it doesn't have to be a full hour. Like, that's really time consuming. But is my manager checking up and supporting me and coaching me on the goals that I set? And sometimes you have different geographic regions, and so it's like that could be via Skype. It could be via phone. It could even be via email, but some connection to support. Here are some current issues, and I'd like you know, if some questions come up, bring it on. But gaming the system, we have a couple clients who use 360-degree feedback. You all know what 360s are? So, and it's typically for leaders. So my boss evaluates me, my peers evaluate me, and my direct reports evaluate me. And what some of our clients have found is that when you also have other, like you can pick the peers. It's not all of my peers, like in mid-size and larger organizations. They were picking people who would give them really good ratings. Right? Their friends and their buddies, so that they get higher ratings because it was tied to their performance review. And then the performance review was tied to pay. We call that gaming the system. So you have to be careful. Those are what we call unintended consequences. So they ripped back their 360 and took a look at how they prevent gaming. Right? That's okay. This is constantly evolving. Calibration we talked about. The disadvantage of calibration is that I just finished talking to my employee about, hey, you're a 4. And then I come back to the managers and I have to downgrade my 4 to a 3 and then go back to my employee and say, sorry, I can't give you a bonus this year. You're only a 3. I really think you're a 4, but the company doesn't think you are. Oh, wow. So we have now not got team. Like, these are all things I've seen, right? So just be careful with calibration. I think most of you work for smaller organizations, so you probably don't have to calibrate as much, but it's when you grow. Asking for a raise. So if you don't tie pay to performance, how does the employee ask for a raise? When do they ask for a raise? Now, here's the tough thing. If you tie pay to performance, it becomes about the money for a lot of employees. And that's not necessarily bad, but if that's all it's about and it isn't developmental, are you actually getting the performance? From an integrated process, are you getting engaged workers and motivated and getting the performance that they're capable of? If you tie pay to performance, it detracts from the goal setting and all the other good things. And finally, is it balanced? Okay, so pros and cons around me filling out and doing a self-evaluation, and then you filling the evaluation out on me. Pros and cons. There's a power imbalance. Even if you're a nice, friendly, approachable, warm, empathetic leader, you still have power because your box on the org chart is above mine. And so most leaders, many leaders don't necessarily have that relationship with all of their employees where they can have open dialogue. And so tying pay to performance can be a little scary. Especially, I love it when leaders say, well, I want them to give me feedback on my supervisory and managerial skills. I say, great, when you ask, do they give you anything? They just blink their eyes, right? Why is that? Because they don't feel safe to give you constructive criticism, and not because of who you are, but because of the role that you're in. And yet, how do you grow as a leader? How do you get better as a leader if you don't get that feedback and get that dialogue going? So what are the roles and responsibilities of employees and managers in performance management? Well, let's take a look. Who has used a balanced scorecard in the past? Hands up. Okay, I didn't think so. Who actually knows what they are? You read it in a textbook. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so generally there's about 4 areas. So a balanced scorecard is like a calibration for an organization. Number 1, you can't probably read that, but on the top it says customer. How is the work that we're doing impacting our clients or our customer base, the people that we serve? Because goals should be set to make sure that we achieve that. And we've got maybe some metrics around that, quality and quantity metrics. Number 2, the second one on the left-hand side says financial. Are we meeting budget? And if you're a for-profit organization, are you making profit? In other words, are you sustainable? If you're hemorrhaging cash, you're going to have to lay people off. Nobody wants to do that. So are you financially viable and sustainable? The third section is what they call internal processes. I like to call it operations. Do you have internal controls in place and checks and balances to run your operations efficiently? And finally, that bottom one, they call it learning and growth on this chart. It's basically your people, your employees. So when you're setting goals organizationally, you want to make sure that you're not overly emphasizing employee growth, but at the expense of, let's say, finance, or our employees are so busy getting trained that they're not available for customer service, right? That kind of thing. So the balanced scorecard has been used for a couple of decades at least to make sure organizations in their performance management systems keeps it balanced at a higher sort of 30,000-foot level. But you notice these squiggly lines? They're not linear. There's a reason for that, is that you want cross-pollination. Because the next slide, you've also heard of, if you've not actually exercised, what we call management by objective. This has been around at least 3 decades, right? Is this from the 60s? It could be maybe 50. No, it's been around a long time, longer than I've been on Earth, but not by much. The whole concept is that, let's say your board of directors or your council has set some strategic direction and some goals, and then your executive director or your CEO then has some goals that have to achieve what the council or the board says, and then whoever reports into the CEO, that layer, needs to make sure that their goals are achieving what's happening up top and so on, and it cascades down. We call it cascading. And that's why I said, do you like to have your goals handed to you? Because this is very, very powerful on a vertical level. But the question is, are managers and employees engaging in really meaningful goal setting then? The art comes with the conversation between the manager and his or her direct reports. And how many of you have actually been taught how to not only set good goals, but also coach people how to set good goals? We've been fortunate enough to have been brought in to actually teach not only goal setting, but managers how to coach other people to set meaningful goals that are, like, you get excited when you walk away from the table. That's extremely rare. So if you want to have an integrated process, there has to be some strategy. And not only what you're doing, but how you're doing it is getting the managers and the employees together on the same page and saying, line of sight. Tell you a quick story. NASA in the 1960s. Remember John F. Kennedy was the president of the United States? And his mission was to put a man on the moon. So NASA was created. They spent billions of dollars. And organizational behavioral specialists came in and they wanted to see how NASA was operating. Some of you have probably heard this story, right? They went and they talked and interviewed all these different employees. Because remember, NASA was new. Nobody had ever done anything like this. The space race was on. And they went up to this janitor who was pushing a broom in the laboratory, the Jet Propulsion Lab, JPL. And they said, what is it that you, like, what are your contributions here at NASA? And the janitor said, you know what? I'm helping put a man on the moon. Because he saw how his contributions, cleaning out the scientists' trash cans and cleaning out the labs, was actually helping roll up to a bigger mission. Talk about engagement, because really that's crummy work for a lot of people, right? But saw how that, so what is it that your supervisors and managers are doing or you're doing with your employees to help them understand the bigger picture of why they're here and how doing this paperwork or working on this Excel spreadsheet might be the monotony, but how does that help connect to something bigger, a purpose? That's where you actually get integration. It isn't from the forms, it isn't from the systems, it's from the conversations and the coaching. So, that being said, I'm going to give you a couple of quick best practices around what you can do before. Whether you're meeting monthly, quarterly, or annually, doesn't matter. Number one, schedule it. Teach your managers to schedule it. Put it in their calendar, and it could be 15 minutes, right? If it's quarterly, it doesn't have to be long. It's just like, how are you doing? It's just like coaching. So schedule it and prepare for it. Prepare to add value as opposed to just walking through the system. So what that would mean is, let's go for coffee. Let's have a conversation around what's working for you, some successes. Let's celebrate those. What's getting in your way? Some barriers. And how can I help you? And if there's any corrective feedback that I can give you about, because some employees are motivated by corrective feedback versus positive reinforcement, then if there's one thing that I would recommend that you do, look at this. And here's why, and we're going to talk about feedback shortly. So teach your supervisors for that 15 minutes to take 10 or 15 minutes to prepare something meaningful. During the meeting, well, if it's a formal review and it's a 1 hour, if you're still doing that, then you got to teach your managers how to set the stage, to open it up, to create safety, and make it balanced. So why do we have this picture here? 30%, 70%. The reason why your rear view mirror is so small is that you look in the past behind you to educate you around the future. 70%, your windshield is where you want to be looking. Those formal reviews, which are typically what we use as legal documents, right? Defensible documents in the personnel file, you want it to be developmental, so getting them future focused, ideally. and closing with some action plans, some steps around what to keep doing or what to change. And then finally, I like the shoebox. Because if you're only doing annual reviews, I don't know if you've ever done the roundup, or oh my gosh, it's been 12 months, I've got to scramble and it takes me 2 hours or 3 hours just to collect balanced feedback for each employee. So we teach our managers or supervisors to keep what we call proverbial shoebox. It can be electronic, or it could be a paper working file around all the kudos, all the accolades, the emails when clients sent, hey, thank you so much, Barb, Barb gets, all of our clients always tell me, oh my gosh, Barb is so amazing. I've got this huge, oh sorry, Barb, I just put you on the spot. She doesn't like that. But basically, battery's running a little. Might need your help with that. But basically collecting it throughout the year and teaching your employees to collect those positives so that if they're coming prepared as opposed to having to go, oh, I forgot that I worked on that project 6 months ago. That was so long ago. So teach them to collect it throughout the year. Oh, I should ask, how many of you have actually invested in training your managers and employees about the performance management system? Has anybody ever done training? Yeah, fabulous. Employees as well as managers? Mostly managers? Both, fabulous. Managers, yeah. We often, and it's better to do some training than none, but ideally, you get more engagement when the employees understand their role as well. So any questions about what we've talked about so far? Because this has all been around the review. Yeah? Okay, the question is, what's the recommendation around tying pay to performance? My preference is, and most of our clients who are smaller clients that we do like when we look at their performance review systems and help them upgrade them, we recommend that unless you're a profit-driven organization, because a lot of ours are not-for-profits, if you're profit-driven, go ahead, tie pay to performance, but then make sure that your evaluations and your KPIs, like you've got the systems in place to be fair and objective. My recommendation is to remove, my preference is to remove pay and don't make the direct tie. I mean, yes, you're still using your performance reviews to inform you whether or not you give a raise. But if you do that direct correlation, you get more gaming, you get people not necessarily showing up as authentically, not all, but many. So my preference is to separate the two and put systems in place that allow employees to ask for those raises, or have managers actually, it's even better if the managers can identify opportunities for raises, but to separate it from the developmental performance review process. Keep the review about development. Okay, look at that. Okay, so because you have the slides in front of you, let's work off the slides. The next one after the meeting is we look at those goal settings, so planning. You've all heard of SMART goals, hey? You probably read on social media how SMART goals are going the way of the dodo bird. Do you know why? Because most of us don't actually know how to set SMART goals. And not only that, we don't know how to coach other people to set goals. So in our training, we always start with, tell me your intention. What is it that you want to do? And then I start to slowly coach you and pull out of you, how are you going to get there? And how are you going to know that you've arrived and by when? Really? But unless you teach people how to set SMART goals and then teach your supervisors how to become coaches, SMART goals are just an activity that doesn't actually get integrated to your whole performance process. Yeah. Oh, look at that. More technological difficulties. Okay, so then the only click-through slide that I had is coming up here, but coaching. So we talked about review, we talked about planning. Ideally, if I have a plan. Oh, and by the way, don't make them set more than a handful of goals. right? And if you've been in a farming accident, no more than 4, just kidding. But I mean, 5 goals is a lot of stuff to be focused on. So I like 3, no more than 5 goals. Because otherwise, what becomes important? So that's great. Now I know what you're interested in. I know what you care about. How about the feedback? This is where, if you only invest in teaching, in training for your supervisors or managers, get them focused on learning how to coach and provide feedback. And I'm going to get you to go straight to the slide that has a model, and this model is from the Center for Creative Leadership. And it starts with context, behavior, impact, and next steps. What was the context of what you did, the behavior? So it's about action and results. Good feedback is always about action results, the natural consequence of what you did and why that was good, or what you did or how you did it and why that was bad. Most of us, if you were raised in a school system like I was, we were taught, hey, what you did, go change it. We go straight from action to next steps, and we don't actually tell the employees why. And that rationale piece, that impact statement, is what turns you from being a jerk boss to being a coach and a supportive leader. So at your table groups, what I'd like you to do is talk with your neighbors around feedback in your organization. Because quite frankly, you know, the review and the planning, I think that when you're coaching and your feedback is targeted, you have a beautiful integrated system. But if all you got right now is coaching and feedback, that's pretty powerful if it's done well. So discuss what kind of feedback and coaching is your workforce getting and giving. Ready, set, go. 2 minutes. So how many of you feel that feedback is an area, like providing coaching is an area of real opportunity in my organization? Yeah, it's true in most organizations. And so you have to look at the structural pieces. Do the managers not know how to give motivational feedback? Okay, so then can you coach them, or can they be trained? Or is it structural? Is it because they don't have access in a timely way? Like, what are the barriers? Because really that's the key to integrated processes, which is why we're gonna go next to technology. So pros and cons, because you have access, right? If I have people in remote locations, I can get access to a system. How many of you have an online system now? Anybody? Yeah? Okay. Do you mind me asking which system? Like, what's the platform? Workday? Oh, I've heard good things about Workday. Do you like it? Oh, I better not say. Okay, no. Yeah. It's hard to implement a new system, but when you do, it can be really efficient. Anybody use something different? You built your own? Oh, that can be pricey, hey?
Program that we built with them, they now sell. So we got, ours was really cheap.
Well done, collaborative effort. So you got some cost savings, building something tailored that they could repurpose. Ah, smart. Well, so there are some really great systems that are out there. These are just some, like you've all heard of many of you have heard of Halogen, et cetera. Access challenges. One project that I worked on years ago, I won't tell you the organization, but had 18,000 employees. The guy who's casual or part-time picking weeds out of the flower beds of various campuses and sites doesn't have computer access. So then you've got to have, you've got to align your systems to your people, and thinking of geography, thinking of computer literacy, et cetera. So what I find is the biggest complaint that a lot of my clients, larger clients, have is that their system, the technology, is not integrated with their LMS, which is learning management system. And so you want an integrated performance management system. You also want it tied to the learning and the training that you're investing in. But my biggest concern is that if we replace the like paper form, paper's the way of the dodo bird, I get that. But it was never about the form to begin with. It was always about the conversation. So when we go online, it becomes more process-focused, and you have to be careful that the managers don't stop having those conversations. Because if it's too process-oriented and not people-oriented, it's not necessarily going to achieve the results that you want. So finally, dashboard. The only thing I want to say about this is 3 things. Make sure your goals are individual, number 1. Number 2, team. And number 3, organization. So me, us, the team, and we as the organization. If you don't have that, and if you, because some of us use dashboards, like we have some great clients that use these great dashboards where the employees can see how they're measuring up against their own results, as well as how their peers, like there's a nice healthy competition and teams against teams, as well as, you know, in a good way, as well as how does this roll up to the line of sight, NASA, organizational contributions. If you're going to use dashboards, make sure it's not just individual, but that there's also the team and the organization. So with that said, we've looked at the review, the planning, and the coaching around the integrated proactive performance management system. When all else fails, we put people into progressive discipline. And this is where Barb and I, when I say Barb and I, Barb, gets to do a lot of our heavy lifting, is helping managers and supervisors around how to do progressive discipline well. Who has good systems and templates in place for those form letters and the processes? Yeah? If you don't, we have some free resources that we can give you that you obviously have to tailor to the situations and put your company logo and all that kind of stuff on it. But we're happy to share some of those resources with you. But ultimately, when our system is broken, and most systems aren't fully functional, then we do have to have some tough conversations. We do a lot of training also around this with managers and supervisors, how to have these conversations and what to expect when you have these conversations. Because not every employee is in the right role at the right time doing the right job. So they need some support, and when they can't do what the organization needs and wants from them, we have to help them exit left gracefully. And we give them every opportunity we give them coaching, and when coaching doesn't work, then we strike 1, verbal. Strike 2, gets a little bit more serious with our tone. Written, and they sign off on it, and that becomes your defensible document in the personnel file. And strike 3, you might do a final written warning or you're out. It's up to you, whatever your policy says. But this stuff is not in law. Right? So your policy has to just define what your steps are. So with that said, ending on a real positive note, hey, but I mean, how many of you have had to put people through progressive discipline? Most of you, right? Yeah, it's nice to have a process. Otherwise, it feels personal. So with that said, any questions before we go for a quick break? Okay, awesome. Where are we for time? Oh, look at that, 10:26, we're 1 minute over. Sorry about that. I believe we're going for a 10-minute break, so get some water and lose some water. And when, sorry about that. And when you come back, we're gonna get the table set up with some new handouts for you, et cetera, et cetera. So, question, do you wanna meet some new neighbors? In other words, do you wanna move to maybe a different table and get some new perspectives? No, okay, stay where you are then. All right, see you in 10.